Thanks everyone for coming. My name is Grant McCallum, and today I'll be talking about how to organize a precinct. And you know, a lot of us early in 2008, 2007 really didn't know, being political novices, didn't really know what a precinct was and how important a precinct is to organize. So that's the hope of this go around, is to get a feeling for what a precinct is and how important it is to organize a precinct, and especially for political candidates that you want to see in office. So the title of this presentation is called Nuts and Bolts, the Key to Victory. And this was based on information given by the Ohio Republican Party on their thoughts on how to organize a precinct. So basically I'm going to go through the highlights of that, as well as talk about some specific Ron Paul information. How did he do here in 2008? Where did he get votes? And kind of marry the precinct with the party with what if scenarios, like what if we had a lot of precincts, inactive precincts in Cuyahoga County? What could we have accomplished, not only in 2008 but also now, seeing that he's running again in 2012. So with that saying, here's the agenda. Briefly talk about the County Central Committee, and the Republican Party, Cuyahoga County, Libertarian Party, they all have central committees. So I'll briefly describe what this central committee is, what their functions are, and how important it is if you really want to be politically active and have a voice in politics, how you should try and get on the central committee, whatever party you think is right for you. Look at where in the county did Ron Paul get votes in 2008, and where are the most chronic Republican voters. And by chronic Republican voters, I mean these are the people that every single time there's a ballot, they're out voting. So you can count on them that they're going to show up at the polls or an absentee ballot and vote. So it's key to focus on the chronic Republican voters. We'll see where those are throughout the county. Then we'll go into organizing the precinct, volunteer recruitment, and a precinct survey, how to conduct one. Get out the vote activities, we might hold off because I just heard that our primary is now in May instead of March. So we have a lot of time before we get out the vote activity, so we'll hold off on that. Maybe a later date we'll have another one. So this is a map of Cuyahoga County showing this is the 1,400 precincts throughout the county. And I've blown up the South Euclid one so you can see how basically the size of a precinct. As I mentioned before the presentation, that it shrunk from 1,400 down to 1,000 precincts. So you're able to go up online, the county board of elections, and look up what precinct you're in. And this is for any county, whether you're in Lake County or whatever. You can go to the board of elections and you can find out what precinct you're in. So how this matches up with a party central committee is that every 2 to 4 years, depending on what county you live in Cuyahoga County is every 4 years, every presidential election cycle, precinct committee people are elected directly by the Republican voters in that precinct. So it's not hard to get on the ballot if you want to become a committee person. Basically you need to get a handful of signatures from Republican voters, and then your name will appear on the ballot, same as Ron Paul's, in the primary. So, and then you go out and canvass your neighborhoods and try and secure votes so you can become a committee chairperson. The committee members elect a county chairman. So the committee members select the county chairman, and the county chairman's responsibilities for all the day-to-day activities of the party. Now the duties of the central committee member, you're thinking, oh, I have to go every week to some type of meeting in a different part of the county. But no, there's really only 2 to 3 meetings a year for the central committee. This is for the Republican Party. To attend those meetings, and you have a vote and a voice now within the party. So if they're doing something you don't like, you can actually challenge them instead of sitting on the outside of the room complaining. So that's key why it's important to get into these committees, and especially the different committees within the central committee they have, whether it's finance committee or whatever, to understand what they're doing and change things if you don't like what they're doing. Maintain a precinct organization is the other objective, support party functions, and encourage participation of other Republicans or Libertarians or Democrats, whatever central committee you find yourself in. So this is the map of Cuyahoga County, and back in 2008, I got all the voting records. And these are the precinct leaders. So these are the central committee members, and this is kind of how they're distributed. If there's a red box, then that committee position is filled. And every precinct has a committee person. So theoretically, there should be 1,400. There's only 486 filled back in 2008. So, if looking at the voter data, the red box is it has a precinct leader, and Ron Paul did not get a vote, at least one vote in the county. Okay, the blue boxes are there is an existing central committee person, but Ron Paul received at least one vote. So there's at least one Ron Paul supporter in that precinct, right? So that's 402. So there's a total of 486. So you can see that there's no leader, they're completely empty, and Ron Paul had a vote in those precincts. That's 636. So if all of those 636 people that voted for Ron Paul that could run unchallenged would get into the central committee, and now we have more Ron Paul people, by 200 people in the central committee, than the establishment or the existing Ron Paul or the Republicans. So you can see the power of the precinct and getting in and being active. So that's one of the pushes that we try to do here is to get people involved in the precinct. The 912 groups are doing this. The Tea Party Patriots are doing this because they understand the importance of getting in. So if we want our views to be heard within a party, then we have to start looking at this strategy to get involved. So, but you can see, Ron Paul got a lot of votes. Not a lot, but at least one, and it's a start, right? And getting into the committee is key. So looking at where do most of the Republican votes come from, it's kind of hard to see, but basically, this is looking at 2006, 2008, and 2010 data, and looking at all the Republican votes, it's typically about 80,000 votes. For no matter what election it is, that are going to come out and vote. And the top three are Parma, which averages about 6,500 people, and then I think Strongsville's next at 6,400. So the usual candidates, predominantly the west side. Cleveland has 7,000 that come out, so you see that just about as many people in Parma come out and vote Republican compared to Cleveland, the entire city of Cleveland. So Southie, what I put there is 1,200, and Solon here on the east side is 2,600, comes in number 10. So of all of these, just these 10, the top 10, that's 50% of the Republican votes in the county, consistently. So, if we want to attract Ron Paul voters, this is probably where we should focus our time and energy, at least in Cuyahoga County. So I could also do, the east side top 10, but primarily we want to probably focus our time on the west side, and then North Wells in the south there. So, and we've heard it before, politics is a game of numbers. The more numbers you have, the more you're going to win. So, we need to reach out to these chronic voters to turn the vote over to Ron Paul. Okay, so organizing your precinct. And this is going back to that, the Republican book is, getting a lay of the land, knowing the geographic data, the retirement communities, people that might want absentee ballots, helping them out with that. Shopping districts where you can pass out literature, kind of knowing the area of the precinct. The economic and social data, who lives in your precincts, upper class, ethnic groups, trying to understand that slice of data. And then the political data is, what streets have the highest percentage of registered voters, how do they vote, is it 60% Republican, 60% Democrat, and then getting a voter list. Lists are always key in politics. The more names you have to reach out to, help you might be able to receive, it's critical. So getting phone numbers and email addresses, and then get out the vote activities, which we'll talk about maybe at another time. So this is a map that I created. This is my precinct, just to give you an idea of the area. It's basically 3 long streets in South Euclid. And this is a pretty cool website. I've heard of it. It's called batchgeo.com. And basically, you give them a list of addresses, street addresses, city, and you feed it into their website and with a group identifier. So I did independents, Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians. And it basically uses a GPS system as well as Google Maps and puts pins where those addresses are. So this is, and you can kind of deselect if you just want to look at the Democrats, you just hit the Democrats. So this gives you an idea of your precinct or any precinct, and so that you can see how it trends. But for my precinct, there's 167 Democrats, 336 Republicans, 336 Democrats, a lot of independents, 417, and we have 1 Libertarian in the precinct. Now, if you look at the chronic Republican voters, and how I define a chronic voter is that if they voted 10 times in the past 10 years. So the files you download from the Ohio Secretary of State has got, I think, the past 10 years of voting history. It just marks an X or whatever thing you voted in. And so more than 10 times in 10 years, that's what I consider a chronic voter. So I had 93 of them. So quickly you see the precinct that I have to deal with for Ron Paul in the primary, because obviously we have to win the primary for him first. So if I'm just looking at chronic Republican voters, my 1,000 people in my precinct went down to 93. So those are the people that I really have to focus on first. So so that's what I'll be doing. So you think about an 8.5 page, cut it in half. That's 50 pages. I have a printer. I can make some literature to hand out, and that's all I had to do to reach those 100 people or so. So the number of votes Ron Paul received in 2008 in this precinct was, anyone want to guess? I wasn't living there. It was 1. So there's at least 1 Ron Paul supporter in this precinct. So I was living in Cleveland Heights in 2008. The total number of South Euclid votes for Ron Paul is, I think, 67. So you can see there's 18 different precincts in South Euclid. So because it was never organized specifically for Ron Paul, it'd be interesting to see, take all of your precincts, we can compare them to what happened in 2008 versus 2012, and see how important it is to become a precinct organizer.
Now, how exactly did you acquire that information?
The Board of Elections, the Secretary of State has these, files that you can download, and they update them at the end of every month.
Okay.
And you go to their site, click on the county, you download the county, and I wrote a software program that would go in and find all this stuff out. So I was hoping if you had some time to try to create a web interface where you could just put in your precinct and I would pop all this information out. So, but yeah, it takes a little bit of work, but you can tease the data out. So,
as far as how many votes Ron Paul got, or any other candidate in that particular primary, is that also available in the same source?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The who got the votes? Go back to Steve's question. The numbers for the precinct I got from the Secretary of State's website. The Cuyahoga County Board of Elections has all the historical voting data, so you can go through that and see. And that applies to any other county too. So of course, having help always makes the job easier. So, they, suggested looking for a long time, registered Republicans or young people that are pretty new to the process but want to get involved, or retired people that are looking to stay active in the community. So these are the type of people you want to try and help to recruit. Also looking at county volunteer files, who's working the polls, they might be interested in helping out too.